What would you do if someone locked you in a frozen prison thousands of miles from home? With no trial, no lawyer, no hope? What if the only way out was to walk across frozen Siberia, the Gobi Desert, and the Himalayas, all on foot with barely any food? Most men would give up and accept their fate, but these men chose to do the impossible. This is the true story of one of the greatest escapes in all of human history. Stay with me because this story will change the way you think about survival. The year is 1940. World War II is tearing the world apart. And deep inside Soviet territory, a decorated army officer named John sits alone in a cold interrogation room. Guards slide a single piece of paper across the table. The message is simple. Sign this confession, admit you are a spy, and things will go easier for you. But there is one problem. John is not a spy. He has never been a spy. Every single word on that paper is a lie. So John looks them in the eye and refuses to sign. The guards smile. They were hoping he would say that, because now they have another plan. They walk in his wife. She has clearly been tortured for hours, maybe days. She can barely stand, and she is confessing to everything, that John is a spy, that he is dangerous, that he is guilty. John watches the woman he loves completely break in front of him, and there is absolutely nothing he can do about it. Shortly after, John and dozens of other prisoners are loaded onto a transport and moved deep into Soviet territory to a forced labor camp surrounded by nothing but snow, ice, and silence for hundreds of miles in every direction. The camp commandant gathers all the prisoners together and delivers the rules in a single speech. This entire region is your prison. The snow will kill you long before you reach any civilization. And even if you somehow survive the cold, the local people have been offered rewards for turning in escaped prisoners. They will hunt you down themselves. Do not even think about running. Their heads are shaved immediately. Warm clothing is taken away. At dinner that first night, the food served is barely enough to keep a small child alive, let alone a group of grown men expected to do hard physical labor every day. The vitamin deficiency hits fast, and it hits hard. Within just a few weeks, several prisoners begin going completely night-blind. After sunset, they cannot see anything at all. One evening at dinner, a man named Smith accidentally drops some of his food on the ground. A desperate prisoner lunges for it immediately, but Smith is faster. He pins the food under his boot without even flinching. John watches all of this happen and quietly gives his entire portion of food to the starving man instead. Smith notices. He walks over to John and says in a cold, flat voice, "Being kind in a place like this will get you killed. Remember that." Then he walks away without another word. After Smith leaves, another prisoner approaches John. His name is Roy, and he is American. Not a soldier, not a spy. Just an actor who happened to be in the wrong country at the wrong time. He was arrested simply for being American. John tells him he was framed on false charges too. Roy laughs with a tired bitterness. Me? I acted in the wrong movie. That is literally my only crime. From across the barracks, John notices a man named Waka running a gambling operation right out in the open, right in front of the guards. Nobody stops him. Nobody even looks at him sideways. Roy explains in a low voice. Waka is one of the most dangerous men in this entire camp. The guards let him do whatever he wants because it keeps the other prisoners in line. Every single person in this camp is terrified of him. Later that night, John brings up the idea of escaping. Roy shuts him down immediately. It is not possible. You will not survive even one night out there in that cold. Right on cue, Waka proves exactly how brutal this place really is. He walks up to another prisoner and calmly asks for his sweater. The man refuses. Waka pulls out a knife and stabs him without a single moment of hesitation. Another prisoner immediately strips off his own sweater and hands it to Waka, no questions asked. Waka uses it to settle a gambling debt. Calm. Calculated. Completely ruthless. Days turn to weeks. Weeks turn to months. John slowly and painfully adapts to the brutal rhythm of the camp. Every single day, the prisoners are sent out to mine coal in tunnels where the air is so thick with dust that breathing feels like swallowing gravel. Or they chop wood in blizzards so violent they can barely stand. And then they come back to barracks with no heat, no warm clothes, and almost no food. Night after night, John lies awake in the freezing dark and stares at the ceiling, thinking, planning, refusing to accept that this is where his life ends. One night, John discovers lice crawling through his clothing. Roy says he knows an old remedy. Come outside, I will show you. But just as they step out, a massive explosion shakes the ground. A cave-in in the coal mine. Chaos breaks out across the camp. While Roy buries John's clothes deep in the snow to freeze the lice, John stands completely still, staring at the guard tower in the distance. Watching, measuring, calculating. And for the first time, he truly believes that escape is possible. Roy tells him about his contact, a man inside the camp named Lazar. If they pay him enough, he can provide crucial information about the camp's blind spots and security patterns. The plan begins to take shape. Head south. Keep going south. Eventually, they will reach Mongolia. But the journey will take weeks, maybe months. They need to stockpile as much food as humanly possible, and they need to wait for the right window of weather. Not yet, but soon. Roy begins quietly trading his cigarette rations for extra food, hiding every scrap beneath a loose floorboard. Meanwhile, John recruits Smith, who warns him that Roy has apparently been promising escape to every new prisoner for years. He calls it a con, but something in John's eyes makes Smith change his mind. He agrees to come along. The escape is real now. One night during a raging blizzard, John decides the moment has arrived. The storm is so powerful that footprints disappear in seconds. He drags Roy outside to show him. This is the window. We have to go right now. But Roy suddenly gets cold feet, making excuse after excuse. Not enough food, too dangerous. Not the right time. John begins to wonder, has this man been lying to him this whole time? But before he can think any further, a shadow steps out of the darkness. Waka. He has been watching them the whole time. A knife goes straight to John's throat. I owe gambling debts to very dangerous people inside this camp. If I stay, I'm dead anyway. So, I am coming with you. John had a blade at his throat. There was only one answer he could give. Smith hands Lazar his gold watch, the last valuable thing he owns, in exchange for one critical piece of information. Lazar pulls him close and whispers the plan. Shut down the generator during the guard shift change. You will have exactly 10 minutes of total darkness across the entire camp. That is your window. Do not waste it. The night finally arrives. One prisoner kills the generator. Another cuts through the wire fence. The alarm screams into a howling blizzard, but there is nobody out there to hear it. 7 men dissolve into the storm. The guards release dogs immediately and charge into the forest with weapons. But the blizzard has already swallowed every single footprint. Every scent is gone. The men have vanished completely into the frozen darkness. The 7 men run through the forest as fast as their broken bodies allow. Their lungs are burning. Their legs feel like dead weight. But they keep pushing. John gasps out between breaths. The dogs are faster than us. Whatever you do, do not stop moving. But the blizzard is now working against them too. The snow blinding their eyes, the wind cutting through every layer of clothing they have. Some men want to stop and find shelter. John refuses. This storm is the only reason the guards can't see us either. We use it. He grabs Waka's knife, strips thick bark from a nearby tree, and carves rough protective masks for each man. Now they can walk directly into the blizzard without going snowblind. One by one, the masks go on, and they push forward into the white. When the storm finally breaks, the 7 men collapse and take stock of their food. That is when John notices something. Roy's jacket is on Waka's back. Waka looks John dead in the eye and explains calmly. Roy was just about to betray the entire group to the guards to save his own skin. Waka stopped him. Permanently, and he took Roy's entire food stockpile in the process. Smith leans close to John and whispers, "Bringing Waka along is exactly like making a deal with the devil himself." John knew that, but it was far, far too late to do anything about it. The group pushes south, day after day, using the position of the sun to navigate when they have nothing else to go on. John calculates that at their current pace they still have 3 to 4 weeks before reaching the nearest lake. But their food will last barely 1 week. They need to hunt. They need to fish. They need to find something, anything. Waka suggests raiding a nearby village. Everyone refuses. Too dangerous. Too risky. Too wrong. Then, one evening, a prisoner named Kazik goes off alone to collect firewood. Night falls quickly, and with it, his night blindness takes over completely. He cannot see a single thing around him. He starts walking in circles, confused, terrified, the cold seeping into his bones. His mind starts to break. He sees his old school teacher standing in the trees. He sees a glowing city on the horizon. He smiles. He thinks they made it. He walks toward the light, relieved, joyful, certain that the journey is over. The next morning, the others find him. Frozen solid, completely still. Just a few meters away from where they had been camping all night long, he had been that close to safety. They bury him in the frozen ground and pray over his grave in silence. Waka stares at the grave and says, "One less mouth to feed. Our food will last a little longer now." Nobody responds. Nobody has the energy. Weeks pass. The food runs out completely. The men begin eating insects they find beneath the soil and eggs they steal from bird nests in the trees. Their bodies are breaking down from the inside. Muscles wasting away, joints swelling, teeth loosening in their gums. They take shelter in a cave. Inside, a prisoner named Thomas begins painting on the cave walls, portraits of each man, landscapes he remembers from home, just to keep his own mind from unraveling. One night, Waka stares at the sleeping men and asks John in a quiet, chilling voice, "Which one of them do you think dies first?" John says nothing. But he understands now exactly what kind of man Waka truly is. Then, a sound outside the cave. Wolves. A whole pack of them, tearing apart the carcass of a dead animal just outside the entrance. The men charge out screaming and swinging branches, making as much noise as possible, until the wolves scatter into the trees. John turns around. And what he sees stops him cold. His companions, men he has walked hundreds of miles with, men he has prayed with and buried friends alongside, are on their hands and knees, tearing raw meat from the wolf's kill with their bare hands and their teeth. Like animals. Like they have forgotten every single thing that makes them human. John cannot watch. He makes a decision right then and there. He tells the group, "I am going ahead alone to find the lake. If I am not back in exactly 1 week, keep going without me. Do not wait." What follows is the loneliest, most brutal week of John's entire life. Rain. Darkness. Hallucinations so vivid he can smell his wife's cooking. He sees his old house, his old street. He nearly walks off a cliff in a dream, but he forces himself forward, one step, then another, until finally, through the trees, the lake, exactly where his calculations said it would be. He allows himself one single moment of relief. Then he turns around and walks all the way back to the group. When he arrives back at camp and tells them he found the lake, there is silence at first. Then slowly, painfully, every single man gets up. 3 days of walking later, they reach the water. They wash their faces for the first time in weeks. They rest. They breathe. And then they push on toward the border. Moving through dense forest, John gets that feeling. The one every soldier knows. Someone is following them. They split up, circle back, and corner the figure between the trees. Waka raises his knife, ready to strike without asking questions. John grabs his arm at the last second. The figure is a young woman. Polish, her name is Irena. She has been surviving alone for weeks, following them from a safe distance, too frightened to reveal herself, desperate for food and the safety of numbers. The group argues. They cannot afford another mouth. She will slow them down. They vote to leave her, but Andres quietly slips away into the trees, and by that evening returns with Irina walking alongside him. She is with them now. Nobody says another word about it. The next morning, they find enough materials to make crude soap from scratch. They wash their clothes for the first time in what feels like forever. They shave. They try, even for just an hour, to feel like human beings again. Waka refuses anyone's help and cuts his own beard alone with his knife, crouched apart from the group as always. Ahead, part of the lake has frozen over. The ice looks dangerously, terrifyingly thin. Irena stares at it for a long moment. Then she runs, full sprint, across the ice, sliding and skidding, until she reaches the other side safely. The men look at each other, then they follow. One by one, slipping, falling, crawling on hands and knees, hearts pounding with every crack and groan beneath the ice, but every single one of them makes it to the other side. They keep moving. As the group walks, Irena speaks individually with each man, learning their stories, their lives before all this. Andres had been a Catholic priest. Thomas, a pastry chef who had always dreamed of becoming an actor. Zoran, a quiet accountant who had accidentally photographed a government building on a morning walk and was arrested for espionage the same afternoon. Anne Smith, a British engineer who had traveled to Russia simply looking for work. The day they arrested him, they shot his teenage son in front of him. During a rest stop, Irena notices Smith's feet. His boots have long since fallen apart. His feet are infected and bleeding badly. Without a word, she tears strips from the hem of her skirt and begins carefully cleaning his wounds. Smith cannot speak. He just sits and lets her work, his eyes wet. They spot railway tracks ahead, which means the border is getting close. John calculates approximately 4 days of walking remaining. But this open stretch of land is heavily watched. Farmers, local militia, armed border patrols. They must cross this section before dark or risk being spotted and reported. While they wait for the right moment, Zoran makes a small joke about Waka's lucky charm. Waka explodes instantly, launching himself at Zoran with his hands around the man's throat. It takes 3 people to pull him off. Nobody laughs at Waka again. Not ever, and then, the moment they have been walking toward for months. The border. Mongolia. They cross it. Men who have not smiled in months are laughing and crying at the same time. Hugging each other, falling to their knees. They made it. They actually made it. But Waka stops walking at the borderline. He turns to John. I am staying. Russia is the only home I have ever known. There is nothing waiting for me on that side. The 2 men shake hands one last time. John holds the grip a moment longer than necessary. Then Waka turns and walks back, alone, into the dark. The remaining men head toward the nearest city. Hope everywhere. Then they see the sign. A single board posted at the roadside. It reads, Mongolia is now under Soviet administration. The border they just crossed means nothing. They have walked all this way, and they are still not free. They find the ruins of a Buddhist monastery and take shelter inside. But the floors are covered in buried skulls. The walls are scorched black. Andres looks around in devastated recognition. He has seen this before. The Soviets erase religion wherever they go. Priests executed, churches burned to the ground. Faith treated as a crime. His own church back home was destroyed the same way. The day he saw it happen, he had attacked a young guard in blind rage. That was the day his own journey began. The group makes a new decision. India. It is the only country left that might truly be safe. But to reach India, they must first cross all of China. And then the Himalayas. For weeks they walk through the Gobi Desert under a sun so violent it feels like standing inside a furnace. They wrap branches and torn cloth around their heads and feet. They measure every single sip of water with military precision. Then the water runs out anyway. Horsemen surround them one afternoon, but John stays calm, tells them they are American tourists heading to Tibet. The horsemen ride away. Minutes later, one young rider returns, sent back by the others, carrying water. A complete stranger showing more humanity than most governments ever did. A sandstorm hits. They survive it, but all the water is gone again. Irena collapses. Her feet are swollen to twice their normal size. She begs them to leave her behind. Every single man refuses. Andres lifts her onto his back and simply keeps walking. Hours later, she asks him to set her down. She looks at each face around her, slowly, carefully, like she is trying to memorize every single one. Then she closes her eyes. And she is gone. They bury her in the desert sand without a word. Thomas paints one final portrait. Irena, smiling and alive and beautiful. Then he too dies. And they bury him right beside her in the sand. Smith can no longer walk. He tells John to go on without him. John refuses and stays behind, dragging Smith forward by sheer force of will. That night, John tells Smith about his wife, how she was tortured, how she broke, how he has to get home to her, how he cannot stop now. Smith listens. And the next morning, he stands up. They find a river. Then the mountains. Then the Great Wall of China itself, and they cross it on foot. The Himalayas rise before them, impossibly tall, brutally cold. But they climb. A monk finds them near the Tibetan border and leads them to a monastery where they eat their first real meal in months. The head monk advises them to wait for spring before attempting the passes. The others agree. John does not. Before dawn, he gathers his things quietly. When Zoran and Andres see him leaving, they say their final goodbye to Smith and walk out the door behind John. Smith watches them go. Then he turns toward China and the contact who can finally take him home to America. The three men walk out of the Himalayas and into India, and the people there, ordinary, kind, generous people, welcome them with food and warmth and a humanity that brings grown men to tears on the spot. John wanders for 50 more years, country to country. No fixed home, no permanent address. Just moving, because that is all he knows how to do, until finally, Poland becomes free. John finds his old street, his old house. The key is still hidden exactly where he left it all those years ago. He opens the door, steps inside, and after 50 years, after Siberia, Mongolia, the Gobi Desert, China, the Himalayas, and everything in between, his wife is standing there, waiting for him, just like she promised. If this story hit you somewhere deep, smash that like button right now and subscribe to the channel, because next week's story is just as incredible as this one. I'll see you there.